Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping will sign many agreements and hold bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the latest Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Is this annual multilateral organization an answer to U.S. Defense Secretary Carter's remarks about a Great Wall of self-isolation? The early form of SCO aimed at enhancing military trust across the border and fighting three evil forces in Central Asia. How do we assess differences between the alleged assertiveness and proactive diplomacy on the periphery of China when our geopolitical stakes are increasing? Why do Russia and China refuse to forge a military alliance when the U.S. maintains 5 treaty alliances in East Asia and the West Pacific? To address these concerns, we are pleased to be joined here by Anna Tangen, author and columnist, and Cui Hongjian, director of the Department of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies. But before we start the interview, let's look at this.
The Republic of Uzbekistan is a landlocked country in Central Asia. Its GDP expanded 8% in 2015 despite continued weakness in the global economy. Manufacturing has grown in recent years and now accounts for approximately 1/4 of its GDP. The economy relies mainly on commodity production, including cotton, gold, uranium and natural gas. Since the establishment of a strategic partnership in 2012, both China and Uzbekistan have enjoyed strengthened bilateral ties.
It's of great significance. We are looking forward that during the visit, President Xi and President Karimov will jointly announce to lift bilateral ties to a new level, providing new momentum, new opportunities, and new fields of cooperation. During the SCO summit, memorandums on India and Pakistan will be signed. This signals that the SCO is starting to take new members in gradually, based on a consensus. This is a sign that the organization is gaining more influence and an entry into a new development stage.
China and Uzbekistan have enjoyed fast development in their economic relationship. Bilateral trade between the two hit $3.5 billion in 2015. China's exports to Uzbekistan totaled $2.23 billion, while imports stood at $1.27 billion. China is Uzbekistan's biggest source of direct investment. According to the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, China's direct investment to Uzbekistan reached $510 million by April 2016. Under the Belt and Road Initiative, China and Uzbekistan have carried out comprehensive cooperation in energy, finance, transportation, agriculture and telecommunications.
Gentlemen, what will be the major issues topping the agenda between President Xi Jinping and his counterpart at the SCO summit?
Yeah, exactly. Now, this time, as we know, because it's a very, very, I think, important time for SCO, because everybody is looking at how could, after 50 years establishment, how this SCO go, where direction, especially when we look at this security situation in this region, not only in Central Asia and also Asia and the Pacific region. Yeah, people will have some questions. How is this development of SCO? Or maybe, perhaps, just like somebody suspected, perhaps there will be a kind of confrontation between SCO and some other, military groups led by United States. Or how could SCO keep the balance between its function to keep the security in this region and its, the other important function to help the development, economic development. So people will have some questions, and also people will also look for maybe a new stage for SCO.
I think the specific things are obvious and coming into the fold. Two countries who have had traditionally poor relationships joining in a forum which is united, and it's an unusual forum, and now that it represents, with those two additions, half the world's population. About 42% of the world's GDP. This is a very, very important alliance, and it also shows that the SCO is starting to go eastward. Now, I think that's what you were pointing. Is there a line in which this? I think it's a little bit different from NATO, though, and I think what we're seeing a lot of now, gradual creep of Europe towards China, not necessarily towards the U.S. It's kind of in between at this point. It'll be interesting to see how that develops.
Observers of the SCO say there have been years of deliberations within and among member states of the SCO about the enlargement of this regional bloc. Pakistan and India come across as the first two in the pecking order. Why do you think the SCO has waited so long before they made up their mind to include Pakistan and India? Is that because of the disputes between these two major countries in South Asia?
I think firstly, maybe at the beginning of its SCO didn't look at itself as a very big regional organization, and I think the first or original function for this organization is to help the security, especially in the bordering areas between those member states. So I think firstly it's just because if we look back to the past, firstly it's a Shanghai 5 states organization. So that which means that just the 5 states just to deal with this security issue between them. But I think now, of course, now the situation is keep changing in this region and in global level. So I think for SCO, it needs to do something, I think. And yes, I agree with my colleague. It's the first time maybe for SCO to have some new member states from other region. I mean, not from Central Asia, from South Asia.
Gentlemen, here is a very important concern for the outside observers about the future and the current functions of the SCO. Is it more about development or about security? Now, that's a question that was first put forward by Kofi Annan, perhaps, if not by Dr. Boutros-Ghali in the wake of the Cold War. What will be the major task of the UN Security Council? Of course, SCO is not a copy of the UN Security Council, but security and development, which should be prioritized?
Well, I think you shouldn't be talking about prioritizing. You should be talking about how they work in tandem. You cannot have the trade and development unless there's security. And obviously, with threats being posed in the Middle East and growing to other areas, with Afghanistan still in a state of flux, it's very, very important to do this. Now, I personally believe that the desire was to bring Pakistan into the fold. This is a very important country to OBOR and things like that. But at the same time, if they had brought Pakistan in alone, this would have been seen as a challenge and a group blocking against India. And I think China is trying to balance its interests and its attention between these two, let us say, not parties who do not get along.
I think according to the Chinese perspective, perhaps the better way is we could not put security and development, you have to make a choice between them. According to Chinese logic is, if we look at this, especially the root cause for some security issue, certainly we will track back to the development issue. So that's the reason why, even at the at the beginning of the SCO, China tried to put the development issue on the agenda of SCO, which means that China hopes that once we want to have a long-term stability to deal with any security challenges, firstly, we need to have some more development. I think that's the logic of China.
And I think you could put in context by looking at what Xi did prior to coming to this. He was in Serbia, he was in Poland, and these were both key states to this move westward in terms of development. But what was he talking about? He was talking about infrastructure. He was talking about moving excess capacity from China into these areas to create jobs. As you said, you cannot have a stable environment if the economics are not stable themselves. So you see China doing something, and I remember a quote from his speech that he gave in Uzbekistan when he arrived, and he said, "The tree that does not flower will not be paid attention to." And this is very true. There's been a very, very steady tendering by the Chinese government, Xi in particular, going yearly to each one of these areas and saying, listen, here's some trade, here's some things that we want to do. We want to sign some more partnerships, some more strategic agreements about our trade future, and also tending to these security issue, which is also on uppermost of everyone's minds. How are you going to have all these pipelines, railways, all of these things, factories, this whole line extending if you cannot protect it?
For example, President Xi Jinping will attend a ribbon-cutting ceremony to put a mega project such as the tunnel into practice. And now, how could President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart align the vision of SCO with the execution of the Belt and Road Initiative? When we look at the issue of security in the framework of SCO, we have to focus on, for example, China-Pakistan economic corridor.
Yeah.
Now, most of the questions concerning the future of this corridor between Pakistan and China would be security because of the rise of the Pakistani Taliban. When I was interviewing an Indian scholar at the Shangri-La Security Dialogue in Singapore a few weeks ago, this guy from New Delhi said, whether India wants to go further or expand or reach into the West Pacific region and join hand with the United States along with Japan to restrict the influence of China depends on what China would do to limit the influence of the Taliban. He gave me the apparent understatement as if we were conspiring with the Pakistani Taliban, and whether we would do more willingly to restrict the influence of the Taliban in Pakistan. But that's, after all, the concern of the Indian guy. So, how serious is the
you can't say
issue
it's
of
just a concern, because you see the Indian Navy now engaging in military exercises with the U.S., Vietnam, right on the doorstep of the South China Seas. This is somewhat troublesome. So they are sending very, very strong signals that they believe that they're in the catbird seat, that they can switch over to the U.S. or they can favor China.
India is playing to both sides,
Yes.
the United States and
Absolutely,
and China.
and they make no pretense about it. I've talked to leading figures in their foreign policy, and they say, look, we are taking a nationalistic point of view, and they definitely want to marginalize Pakistan. They want to push it down. They always talk about spanking them and things like this. And I don't think that's necessary things. I think it's better that they're now in a forum where they have to sit across the table from each other.
Now, India is, of course, a victim. India and Pakistan are both victims of Islamic extremism. But do you think SCO, whose initial mission was to fight the three evil forces, would be very helpful in, for example, pushing back the influence of the Islamic extremism? Because we see not only Taliban, Al Qaeda, but also Daesh in the Middle East.
Yes, I think, yes, now maybe this time SCO will have two new members, India and Pakistan. Also the question is coming, or maybe some troubles coming, that how could SCO do something between those two countries, as we know some very, very big problem between them. But of course, just like you mentioned, those two countries, they are facing the same security challenge from extremism. But another question is, I think, frankly, firstly, how could SCO, the member states, could reach a consensus to deal with this issue? And also, how could China and Russia work together to have some balance to, just like mentioned, how is this some strong signal, some strong posture of India? Also, we know India regarded itself as a, water power. So how could, and also for India, it's reluctant to have a, equal talk with Pakistan. I think there will be some problem or questions. Another maybe security issue seriously is how about Afghanistan? Because Afghanistan, if we talk about the Taliban, Afghanistan and Pakistan, they are facing the same problem. And also, especially now from outside, from other regions, even from Europe, now there are also some requirement to SCO to help, stabilize regional situation, to help deal with the issue of Taliban or some refugee issue from Afghanistan to Europe and so on.
Thank you very much. You're watching Dialogue with Anna Tangen and Cui Hongjian. We're discussing the latest round of SCO summit in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, as well as the mission of SCO in fighting evil forces in this region, particularly the idea of enlarging SCO by recruiting Pakistan and India. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Despite dynamics in the process of rapprochement between Pakistan and India, the two most important nuclear-armed countries in South Asia, Indians complain that they have been the victim of terrorist attacks who allegedly come from Pakistan, particularly the Taliban inside Pakistan. Now, do you think membership that's to be granted to India and Pakistan by the SCO in Tashkent will help ease the tensions across the line of control in Kashmir? The Indian guy that I interviewed in Singapore said they are watching out for what's going to happen about the idea of an economic corridor between Islamabad and Beijing, because a part of that corridor will have a lot to do with the Kashmir, the controversial issue, contested area between the two countries. What comments do you have about the efforts that SCO could be making?
Okay. One of the questions I continually have to diplomats on both from India and Pakistan is there any point in which you can see a better future and can be reasonable and compromise? And from both sides, I don't hear a lot of it. But what was interesting is SCO has joint operations, and both India and Pakistan will be part of those. So this will be a historic first.
What kind of operations?
Well, they have security operations. The countries will get together and mount anti-terrorism controls and things like that. This will be one of the first times that Indian and Pakistani troops will be working together instead of facing off as they do on these lines where they march up to each other and kind of a lot of bravado ensues. So I think this is a very important symbolic things, is to bring them onto a neutral thing where it's not just about their differences, it is about the region and perhaps going forward together.
Do you think what Anna Tangen says in his analysis is actually a clear suggestion that the joint military maneuvers in fighting terrorism between Pakistan and India would be part of the confidence building measure?
Yeah, I think so, and also I hope so, because I think it should be helpful to some degree to be a member of the SCO for Pakistan and India, because once they are in the same organization like SCO, they should do something together. Just like he mentioned that they should do some joint exercises, military exercises, because I think the question is, maybe for Pakistan and India, if they are in SCO, maybe the best effort for them is they can do something, try to look for some common enemy,
well, gentlemen,
common challenge, not look at each other as enemies.
Well, few would underestimate the mistrust that has long existed between the two major economies in South Asia militarily. But why don't we focus on the implications of their membership as founding members of the AIIB? I mean, the joint economic stakes may help economists and entrepreneurs on both sides to think in a reasonable way about how to work together instead of antagonizing each other.
Well, I think it's very important, and China is playing a pivotal role in this. I mean, the mere fact that it brought India in on the table at the same time as Pakistan is very significant. Also, China is now perhaps reversing itself on allowing India to enter onto the nuclear, I forget the name of it, but the nuclear trade pact. So if they're allowed to do that, this will perhaps show that China is a good friend to India. And
you
that
mean
they're
the IAEA, the nuclear watchdog?
Yes, yes. And so the combination of giving political face and also offering an economic hand up, I think is very important. We were talking about an economy that was larger than China's by far a few years ago, and now it's a little bit dwarfed.
Afghanistan is yet another issue on the agenda for all leaders in the SCO. So following the military drawdown, I believe it's well underway for the Obama administration. It's a finishing touch of the whole process to phase out the American military presence there, despite controversies on the bilateral security arrangements between Kabul and Washington. What do you think of the latest development in terms of the SCO involvement in the post-war reconstruction? China could also play a pivotal role in this process, right?
There's going to be a vacuum created, even though the United States is not necessarily welcomed in there, and that there's some bad feelings about the past. The fact is there will be a military vacuum that's created, and the SCO has the opportunity to do this. I mean, shortly after the Russians pulled out of Afghanistan, there was an opportunity for the U.S. to go in and lend a helping hand and rebuild this war-torn economy. We failed to do that. If the SCO steps in, perhaps this is one step in a long road to try to stabilize what has been a very difficult area.
Let's look at yet another prospective member of the SCO, Turkey. Turkey is uniquely located between Europe and Asia. President Erdogan drew fire and scathing criticism from the European Union for the alleged abuse of human rights or whatever, and Turks would be very angry about the accusation. Now, after all, European Union and Turkey will have to join hands in stemming the tidal waves of asylum seeking from the Middle East. So, given the frustrations about Turkey's application for membership of the European Union, which itself is mired in the referendum of the UK, the Brexit, what do you think of the chance of Turkey to be accepted by SCO one day in the foreseeable future?
I think firstly it depends on the willingness from Turkey, not depends on the SCO itself, because as we know, recent years the strategy or foreign policy to a much degree it's from the President Erdogan's personality, because it looks like the president want to get a kind of a very very good position between different organizations, different alliances, including European Union, NATO, China, or SCO, and so on. So also that's the reason why now Turkey become the partner to SCO. But so far, I don't think that Turkey will have a very serious willing to be part of SCO.
I think they're just simply waving this in the face of the Europeans to say, hey, we could go this way.
Yes.
If you don't accept us, this is a bargaining chip. Yeah. You really
that's
want
a game
this.
of
You don't
balance.
Exactly. And unfortunately, one thing that people have to understand is the SCO is non-political, in the sense that it does not inquire into the governments of the member states.
Right.
There's no judgment on that. It's not like a traditional Western alliance where everything is benchmarked according to democracy and capitalism. So it's a very, very different type of arrangement. It's just, look, we're banding together for security threats. So yes, he could certainly join, but does he want to join? And would that put an end to his hopes to join the European Union? I don't think the EU really wants him. Maybe in the future under a different leader it might change.
President Putin will be visiting Beijing following the summit meeting in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. The role of Russia should never ever be underestimated because of its concern, quote unquote, about the possible clash between Mr. Xi Jinping's, I mean that's the perspective of the Western media, between Mr. Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative and President Putin's brainchild of Euro-Asian Economic Union. Well, latest science show clearly that the Russians are better prepared to combine the two initiatives together. But do you think there's a lot more to be done between the Russians and the Chinese?
Yes. Yes, especially I think from Western media, always they are focused on how
clashes.
How the clashes between the two giants, right? Especially now between the Belt and Road Initiative and the Euro-Asia Economic Union. But I think from Chinese perspective, even at the very, very beginning, China want to get a kind of integration or linkage between those two, strategy. I mean, the Belt and Road and the Euro-Asia Economic Union. We understand. Now the issue for Mr. Putin is Russia has to, to be part of Asia and the Pacific region. if we know something about how it is a very, very bad situation.
Why does Russia have to go east? Is it because of the economic sanctions after annexation of Crimea?
Yeah. Part of the reason is economic sanction by European Union and the United States. And another, I think, is that how is a long-term development for Russia, because now, even for me, because I'm working on the European studies, in a very, very short time, I don't find any, bright future for the European economy. So Russia have to look for some, dynamic of its development from its eastern direction.
Not long ago, China surpassed Germany to become the biggest buyer of Russian crude oil, and that will make a big difference.
There's no question about it. I mean, the fact is that Russia is still a resource economy. The resources are still going. People
but it
talk
could be
about
victim of a resource curse.
Well,
because of the low level of oil prices.
But this is something that the Chinese plan, the OBOR, is very different from, because it's trying to build capacity in all those areas that it touches, bringing new industries, putting in new infrastructure. Yeah. So it's a very, very different kind of program that has been pushed by the World Bank and the IMF in the past. It's truly creating a regional economic web that would allow it not only to have redundancy. It can go through Russia, it can go through Pakistan, there are other areas it has its sea routes. So China's future is dependent on bringing resources in and then selling value-added goods outside. This is why it's laughable when they say that there's going to be obstruction, navigation of the seas. The last country on earth that can afford navigation.
Gentlemen, there's no question about the political will and consensus shared by both President Putin and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping about this very special strategic partnership that may be used as a counterweight against the pivot to Asia. However, undeniably, there are some mixed feelings shared by many Chinese. They are the silent majority, who say perhaps China is being used by Russians to anger the United States in the South China Sea. That's why 2 aircraft carrier fleet have been sent by the Pentagon to the South China Sea to obviously flex its muscles. What do you think of the allegation that China is being used as a third party between Russia and the United States? How could China position itself without antagonizing, or not antagonizing Russia, but without giving a hard time to Russia and not to give more live ammunition to the United States? Look, we're getting close to Russia. We are 2 permanent members of the UN Security Council. If you force me too much, give me too harsh time, I would definitely align myself with Russia.
Yes, maybe we can hear maybe similar complaints in Russia about China. Russia was used by China, yes, like that. So I think it would be a very, very interesting triangle relations between China, Russia, and the United States. But I think that maybe just like what Putin recently mentioned in this St. Petersburg Economic Forum, say that maybe its security, for Russia is important, but maybe more important say is how could we keep the balance of international strategy. So I think also it's also a big concern for China. So also that's the reason